Hello, this is Friday's guided reading lesson, and we're going to be carrying on with Clever Monkey and finishing off that book today. So, if you remember, before this part, Dad and Mum had been sent in by two burglars to steal some things from Hambone House. Jem and Sandy, in the meantime, had stolen their van and had just found the keys and started to drive it. So we're going to pick up and find out what happens next. As ever, if you want to go read this independently, please do. But if you want to hear me read it, stick around and we'll have a look at chapter 7, which is called In the Driving Seat. It was then that I found that vans are not made for monkeys to drive. I couldn't see out of the windscreen. Jem would have to give me directions. She would also have to stand on the pedals to make the van go or stop. I explained to Jem how the pedals work. Brake, accelerator, she repeated. It was crowded in the driving seat. Jem had to stand on tiptoe and put her head out of the side window to see. Ready? I said. I suppose so, she said. I turned a key. The engine came alive. Accelerator! I shouted at Jem. Suddenly, we were rushing forward. Outside, I could hear Bantam Fog and Chaz Smealy snarling. Their running feet crunched on the gravel as they chased after us. Bam! We hit a statue and knocked off its head. Which way, Jem? I hollered. Left, she cried. Baff! A different statue lost both its arms. Sorry, I mean right. We clipped a tree and the main gate posts before we were back on the road. Luckily, we left Bantam Fog and Chaz Smealy far behind. After a mile or two, Jem and I became much better. A team, you might say. I began to feel proud of myself, but the van must have looked very odd, as if it were driving itself. Certainly, that was what it looked like to PC Duffel. PC is police. He was parked in a side street eating a sandwich. He shook his head. Nah, must be a trick of the light, he told himself as we drove by. Following the signs, we came in sight of Monkeyland. Jem was so excited, she forgot to say one small, important word. Brake. Crash. We went right through the gates and ended up outside Mr. Otterbank's house. A light went on, a window flew open, and Mr. Otterbank's head poked out. It's a van, he said, turning to Mrs. Otterbank, who was in bed with the quilt pulled up to her chin. Blow me, Sandy and Jem had just climbed out, and Sandy is writing something with his paw in the dirt beside the van. Let me see. Help. Mum and Dad, prisoners at Hambone Hall. Come quickly. Oh, I'd better go and see what this is all about. It was then that he discovered all of his clothes had gone. Every drawer and cupboard empty, he wailed. Luckily, Mrs. Otterbank remembered there was something he could wear, something Mr. Otterbank had worn at a fancy dress party last New Year's Eve. And chapter 8 is called Two Mean Monkeys and One Mad Gorilla. Jem and me both screamed when a big hairy gorilla stepped out of Mr. Otterbank's house. It's only me, said Mr. Otterbank's muffled voice. Quickly, back inside the van, both of you. Now, I'll drive now, if you don't mind. He reversed the van past the shattered gates, and we were off again. Meanwhile, PC Duffel had finished his sandwich and was eating an iced bun. He thought, isn't that the white van that looked like it didn't have a driver? I'll look more carefully this time. And so he did. That's all right, he said with a sigh of relief. There's a gorilla at the wheel. A gorilla? Seconds later, a half-eaten iced bun was tossed aside, blue lights flashed, and a siren wailed. I tugged at Mr. Otterbank's sleeve. Mr. Otterbank glanced in the mirror. No time to stop now, Sandy, he said, and he raced on until he reached Hambone Hall. In the headlights, we saw Bantam Fog and Chaz Smealy. Mum and Dad were filling open sacks with treasure from the house. They all looked surprised when the van screeched to a halt and a gorilla sprang out, with two mean-looking monkeys on either side of him. Hold it right there, cried Mr. Otterbank. Hold it yourself, shouted Bantam Fog, throwing a sack of treasure at him. A big fight started, gorilla and monkeys against burglars. And then PC Duffel arrived. He climbed out of his patrol car and looked very confused. He decided to arrest the gorilla for speeding. But when he got him in a headlock, Mr. Otterbank's mask came off. Well, that was too much for PC Duffel. He was so shocked, he fainted. Outnumbered now 5-1, Bantam Fogg and Chas Smealy were quickly defeated. Mum and Dad sat on them, and Mr. Otterbank ran to get some rope from the van to tie them up. "Ever been made a monkey of?" said Mr. Otterbank cheerily. Chas Smealy used some more of his bad words. He really did know quite a few. With the help of Mum and Dad, Mr. Otterbank put Bantam Fogg and Chas Smealy into the patrol car with a note that read, "Arrest these two villains. They use innocent monkeys as burglars." Me and Jem put the treasure nearby for evidence. Mr. Otterbank said, "Now let's get out of here before that policeman comes to his senses." Nobody had to be told twice. We jumped into the van and Mr. Otterbank drove off. He didn't say much as he drove. It seemed like he was busy thinking. And when he saw lots of little figures in badly fitting shoes and clothes hurrying back to Monkeyland, he slowed down and became even more thoughtful. He stopped outside his house and turned back to Dad. "Otis," he said, "I am going back to bed. Please make sure that all the things you borrowed are left on my doorstep, and the keys too. Good night." And he went inside. "Well," said Mum, surprised, "I thought he'd be a bit more cross than that." And Chapter 9 is called What Mr. Otterbank Did Next. Next morning in Monkeyland was pretty much like any other as far as the visitors were concerned. But for the monkeys, there were lots of stories to be swapped, and everybody wondered what Mr. Otterbank would do. Clifton Moke said he expected Mr. Otterbank would build an electric fence. Jem's friend Crystal said it was more likely he would dig a moat and fill it with crocodiles. But I knew Mr. Otterbank wasn't like that at all. And I was right. About a week later, several big plastic bags of old clothes appeared by the tire tree. And on a twig was a newly cut set of keys and a note which said, "Use these wisely." Well, of course, a meeting had to be held about what this might mean. Everyone gathered at the tire tree. Milton Grizzlefur sat high up in his tire, scratching himself and waiting for silence. At last, he began to speak. "Mr. Otterbank is the best human who ever lived," he told us. "He realises that we are not ordinary monkeys. He knows that we need to see the outside world from time to time, and it looks like he's given us permission to do so. But listen to me, monkeys. We have to be much more careful in future." "You can say that again," I muttered. Later, I went for a nap in my favourite tree. You know, I thought to myself as I was falling asleep, the outside world's all right, but yawn. Really, there's no place like home. And that is the ending of Clever Monkey. Well, I hope you liked the story. As ever, you've got some questions to answer. So let's have a look at those quickly, and you can go off and do them. So this is all about that bit we just read. So if you go back to the start of that part, why is it hard for Sandy to drive the van? Can you give 2 reasons, so 1 in each line? Why is he struggling to drive? For number 2, what strange thing does PC Duffel see on page 47? So make sure you're looking at the right page, page 47. What strange thing does PC Duffel see? Number 3, what wakes Mr. Otterbank on page 48? Why does he wake up? What happens? Number 4, why does Mr. Otterbank have to wear a gorilla costume? Where are his clothes? Number 5, why does PC Duffel faint on page 56? And then on number 6, if you go to page 59, Mum says, "I thought he'd be more cross than that." If you remember, this is after they've tied up the robbers. Mr. Otterbank is driving them back. He said, "Mum thinks he'd be more cross." Do you think Mr. Otterbank should have been more cross? So that's yes or no. And then why do you think he should have been cross, or why do you think he shouldn't have been cross? For number 7, bit of retrieval. Can you find and copy the title of chapter 9? Number 8 has got 2 parts. First of all, do you think the monkeys will go out again? They've got the keys. Are they going to go out? Why or why not? And then finally, number 9 is about you. What would you do or say if you saw monkeys disguised as humans out on the streets of Birmingham, what would you do or say if you saw monkeys dressed up like people in disguise? And that is the end of Clever Monkey. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon. All right, bye-bye.